I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the largest inland body of water in California is drying up.
So we still want a Salton Sea here. We just want one that is manageable.
The new Dust Bowl left behind by a shrinking Salton Sea and how it's affecting air quality for people who live nearby.
Plus, you can have a say in what San Diego County could be like in 2050. I'm Peggy Pico with a draft blueprint for roads, housing, and more in the next 3.5 decades. Then, local scientists discover how to cut out bad DNA in this part of the cell, how the research could prevent some genetic diseases, and why it's controversial.
You ever think about quitting?
Only once every 2 minutes or so.
Well, I've quit a bunch of stuff.
The Hollywood spotlight on an iconic hiking trail. The veterans in San Diego who are showing the ropes to a new generation of hikers. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. It's been a day of violence in Baltimore, and police there are warning of what they say is a credible threat against law enforcement across the country. 7 officers have been injured in Baltimore in clashes with rioters. The violence started after the funeral for a man who suffered a fatal spine injury while in police custody. The death toll in Nepal is now more than 4,000 after Saturday's 7.8 earthquake. At least 3 San Diegans are reported missing in the region, and the rescue effort is getting some help from San Diego. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler explains.
The Visualization Center at San Diego State helps to organize and map data in disaster areas for emergency responders. They're one of the many organizations around the world helping to save lives after the earthquake in Nepal. Director Eric Frost says apps like Twitter, YouTube, and Yik Yak have become indispensable.
You have a capability that has never existed in history before that is phenomenally powerful.
Frost says using social media, anyone from any place can help to spot potential dangers for people in Kathmandu.
You can be back here saying, could you go take a closer picture of that building that you just posted, and could you look at the foundation of what's there? That building is going to go over.
Frost says using social media to help map disaster areas is still new, but relief workers find it indispensable. And sharing the work with thousands of people on the web makes sifting through all of that data possible, all with fresh eyes. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Opening arguments began today in the trial of former San Diegan James Holmes, accused of killing 12 people and wounding 70 more at a Colorado movie theater 3 years ago. Holmes pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but prosecutors say he was found sane in 2 separate mental evaluations. The defense says every psychiatrist who's seen Holmes diagnosed him with some form of schizophrenia. Another labor problem at the Port of San Diego. This time, truck drivers are striking over a dispute about earnings and employment status. Drivers are also striking in L.A. and Long Beach. Southern California ports are the primary gateway on the West Coast for hundreds of billions of dollars in commerce a year. City Council wants employees to stay home if they are sick. Today, they voted to give San Diego's hourly workers 3 paid sick days. It's the result of a state bill giving California workers 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. Experts say it could cost the city more than $400,000 a year. San Diego relies on importing 85% of its water from the Colorado River and Northern California, but the rising costs, growing population, and drought are threatening the city's water reliability. To face the challenge, the city is moving forward with its pilot project, Pure Water San Diego. It's a 20-year recycling program to produce a local source of drinking water. Mayor Kevin Faulkner toured the facility, which currently recycles 1 million gallons of drinking water a day.
This is all about the future, and right here, our ability to scale this up to really create a third of our water supply from recycled water. It's the right thing to do for the environment. It's the right thing to do for us to be able to have our own independent water supply.
Faulkner will meet with Governor Jerry Brown tomorrow to talk about speeding up the permit process and state funding. The Pure Water plant has already passed federal and state water standards, but without a permit would cost the city nearly $2 billion to upgrade. As California learns to live with less water, its largest lake is drying up. About 100 miles east of San Diego, the Salton Sea lives off water flowing from nearby farms. That flow will soon thin to a trickle as farm water gets transferred to coastal cities. KPBS science reporter David Wagner tells us how it could affect the health of people living nearby.
Jessica Lavecchio's job requires her to push a baby carriage all around the Salton Sea. Her carriage holds a machine called a pie swirl. It creates a windstorm in a bottle to measure emissions of dust coming off the desert floor.
This area, when we first started doing pie swirl emissions, the sea wasn't that far, and we probably stopped about here.
Lavecchio helps the Imperial Irrigation District monitor air quality along stretches of shoreline that were underwater not so long ago. Here at Red Hill Bay, docks that used to launch boats are now a good hike from the water's edge.
And this used to be connected to the Salton Sea.
Water means fun, and Salton Sea water is ideal for the amateur skier.
The Salton Sea was created over a century ago when a Colorado River diversion project breached. Now, nearby farms replenish it with agricultural runoff, along with pesticides that have been building up on the lake bed for decades. But the Salton Sea can't rely on that inflow much longer. Local officials have agreed to transfer some of Imperial's water to San Diego and the Coachella Valley starting in 2018. But they signed that deal with one big condition.
The state of California said in the water transfer agreement that they would restore the Salton Sea. And to date, we haven't seen any progress with that. So part of our position is we're going to get out here, we're going to be proactive. So part of what we're doing is air quality monitoring. We're looking at areas to see what is emissive right now, what we can do about it, and moving forward, what to do.
Lavecchio says the plan here is to reflood parts of Red Hill Bay, creating habitats for migratory birds that rely on the sea. In theory, those habitats, along with new geothermal energy plants planned for this area, will keep down the dust.
We're really pushing for a smaller but sustainable Salton Sea. So we still want a Salton Sea here, we just want one that is manageable.
The Salton Sea air basin exceeds California air quality standards for windborne dust much of the year. No one around here wants a sequel to Owens Lake. It had its water siphoned off by its southern neighbor, Los Angeles, in the early 20th century. Owens Lake went on to become the largest source of dust pollution in the entire country. Air quality monitors out there also use pie swirls to keep track of dust emissions.
We have almost the same team down here. They know about Owens Lake. They're here helping us do on-the-ground analysis now before we have an issue like Owens Lake.
Meanwhile, people who live right next to the Salton Sea wonder about its future. Yalimar Perez lives in North Shore, California, just blocks from the water.
It has this really nasty reputation, that you're gonna go inside and you're gonna come out without an arm or without an eye or something.
Waves at the beach lap against dead fish that can't tolerate water saltier than the ocean. Walking on the sand here feels strange because the sand is actually ground up bones. Perez learned about the Salton Sea through an environmental program at her high school.
My teacher, he would talk about the Salton Sea, and then I was like, well, I live so close to it, why haven't I gone?
When she did finally go, she was surprised to find it was actually pretty nice.
It's dirty, maybe, from the inside, but from the outside it looks beautiful, and there's still birds here. The birds are still alive.
But Perez knows the Salton Sea is not in great shape, and that lots of people here have asthma. Neighboring Imperial County leads the state in childhood asthma hospitalizations. Maria Godinho lives in North Shore, but doesn't like to get too close to the Salton Sea. She says it can trigger her asthma attacks.
I almost don't go, but when I've been there, I have to keep my nose covered.
Even if the Salton Sea were pristine, winds would still carry dust from other parts of the desert, and industry pollution, shoddy housing, and vehicles idling at the border are also major concerns. Whatever is driving breathing problems, Perez says in a community where many don't speak English, people feel out of the loop.
The wind is going to pass by, and it's going to go into our lungs. It's going to go into our bodies, into our systems, and that's not going to be good for us. People with asthma are going to get more attacks. We could get a lot of sicknesses around here.
Mitigating dust issues would be expensive, but according to one study, not fixing the Salton Sea could create a $30 billion problem. Worsening public health would be part of that burden. David Wagner, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. So what do you want San Diego County to be like for your children or grandchildren 35 years from now? Peggy Pico takes a look at a draft blueprint for the county's future.
So where should new housing developments be built? How about expanded freeways? Or should the focus be on public transportation? Those are just a few issues addressed in SANDAG's new regional development plan called San Diego Forward. Joining me with details of the plan is SANDAG's Director of Land Use and Transportation Planning, Charles Muggs Stoll. And Charles, you like to be called Muggs. So Muggs, what's the main goal of this latest draft?
Well, I think it's a plan for our future. It's a blueprint for the future for the next 35 years out until the year 2050. It's looking at all the land use general plans for all of our cities in the county, and looking at the fact that development is going to be more concentrated in already developed areas, and to develop a transportation plan that feeds that, and to do that in a way that respects our environment and our communities and helps our economy.
Do you have some specifics about how this plan can help accomplish those goals?
Well, yeah, we're going to be investing over $200 billion over the next 35 years on a whole host of transportation projects. And when you say transit or freeways, the fact of the matter is the plan is a little bit of everything. We're providing choices because there's a lot of needs out there, and so we're providing new carpool lanes and managed lanes that we can run our new rapid services in. We're providing new trolley lines around the region. We're doing things to promote healthier and more physically active communities through our active transportation program. We're still investing in open space as part of the transportation program as well. So we have a whole host of things that are going to make that happen over the next 35 years.
Now, as you said, this is a blueprint for ending in 2050. It's designed to meet the region's future needs here in San Diego County. How much bigger are you predicting? How much bigger can we expect this county to get? Well,
we're expecting to grow by about a million more people. We're a little over 3 million now. We'll be a little over 4 million in 2050. And along with that, about 500,000 new jobs and about 300,000 new housing units. And the thing to remember about that growth is about 2/3 of it is simply births over deaths. It's growth from within. If you go back the past 35 years, there was a lot more growth in this region from in-migration from other parts of the country or other parts of the world, but that's not the case anymore.
Back in 2011, the Regional Transportation Plan got tied up in court. It's still in court. It was criticized for focusing on expanding freeways instead of public transit. So what is this latest plan? You were talking about some public transportation. In addition to the lanes, you were talking about the freeway. So how does this plan address public transportation?
Well, fully half of the $200 billion investment goes into transit, either to build new transit lines, say like some of the new trolley lines. We've got 5 new trolley lines that are coming in the future in the plan, and to operate it, to pay for the bus drivers and to pay for the maintenance of the transit vehicles. The vast majority of our investments in the freeway system around this region are on the existing freeways. There's no new freeways that are going to be built in this region, and so most of those investments are adding carpool lanes and managed lanes so that we can provide free access to carpoolers and also run our transit system on those lanes. And then we still have a lot of investments in local streets and roads so that people can, have their neighborhood streets taken care of.
Well, speaking of cars, I know an appellate judge ruled against SANDAG's last regional plan, saying that it was not meeting greenhouse gas reduction requirements. Is SANDAG complying with that ruling?
Well, the law that we are complying with, the Senate Bill 375, sets targets. The California Air Resources Board set targets for us to meet in terms of per capita greenhouse gas reductions, and we have exceeded those, both in the 2011 plan and the plan we're working on now.
How does this draft, if you could just remind me one more, deal specifically with the greenhouse gas issue?
Well, it's part of matching the transportation system with the land use to encourage what all the cities in the county are already doing, which is focusing future development on already developed areas and providing the kinds of transportation choices that that support that, both in terms of the investments we make on the freeways or in the transit systems or even active transportation.
Now, you want public input on this draft. You're seeking it. So how can people get involved?
Well, we have 7 workshops coming up all throughout the region in May. So from Escondido in the north all the way down to San Ysidro in the south. And so we encourage people to come out. There'll be opportunities for them to get their comments on the record, to participate in a panel discussion, and then we're going to have a couple of public hearings too, including one in front of our board in June.
All right, and folks can get that information via our website, kpbs.org. Charles Mugg-Stoll, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
A rare event at the U.S.-Mexico border fence over the weekend. A door was opened for only the second time since it was built. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero says it meant a brief reunion for a handful of families.
10-year-old Alex Lopez hadn't seen or touched his mother since she was deported to Mexico more than 2 years ago. But on Sunday at Friendship Park, he and his brother Giovanni were able to embrace their mother for about 2 minutes. They were also able to see 2 younger siblings who are staying with her in Tijuana. Lourdes Barraza Torres was deported while the boys were at school. They never got to say goodbye.
I felt like if I'll never see her again.
After the reunion, the boys pressed their hands against the fence, trying to touch their mother and younger siblings. Barraza is applying for permission to return to the U.S. In the meantime, the boys are staying with their father, who's a U.S. citizen. Their family was one of 4 allowed to spend 2 minutes together under the door. The last time the door was opened was back in 2013. The event was organized by the San Diego nonprofit Border Angels in collaboration with the U.S. Border Patrol. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Salk Institute researchers are on the cutting edge of a new debate over scientifically editing human DNA. Peggy Pico explains why it's so controversial.
Before we can talk about why this is important, I've got this simple explainer. Inside a human cell, there's a power source called the mitochondria, which contains DNA. That DNA is passed to offspring, including faulty DNA that can cause devastating genetic diseases. Now, local scientists are discovering ways to splice up that DNA so a parent only passes along the healthy genes. Here with the details are my guests, mitochondrial DNA researcher Alex Ocampo with the Salk Institute and Evan Snyder, an FDA advisory board member for a similar DNA technique with the Sanford Burnham Medical Research Institute. And Alex, what kind of diseases or conditions are caused when bad mitochondrial DNA is passed to an offspring?
So mitochondria is involved in essential functions in the cell. One of them is energy production. Maybe the most important one is energy production. When you have mutations in mitochondrial DNA, these diseases will affect mainly organs such as the brain, the heart, the muscle. So these will be very devastating diseases affecting kids that will suffer from muscle weakness. They have a brain impairment, neurological disorder, liver disorders, many other disorders, and they actually reduce quite some the life expectancy. So these kids will only live into the early teens, and many of the cases it will be fatal diseases.
And it's very disabling, this particular types of genetic diseases. Now, Salk is doing research. You're doing research on mice to eliminate the faulty DNA, but still get the mitochondrial good DNA into the offspring. So in the simplest terms, can you tell us how you're doing that? How do you take out the bad DNA and just leave the good DNA?
Okay, so what we do is we take advantage of the situation in the oocyte or in the embryo in which you have wild-type normal mitochondrial DNA and mutated one. What we do is we introduce some molecular scissors that will go and will recognize which ones are mutated, which one is the bad mitochondrial DNA, and will make a cut in that molecule. That will lead to the degradation of the molecule, and that will mean that the kid that will come from that embryo will be a healthy kid. So
far, like you said, you've been doing it in mice. You have these scissors, these molecular scissors that cut out the bad DNA. How's the research been going? Have you been successful?
Yeah, actually, we were very happy with our results. So we are using a mouse model in which you have 2 types of mitochondrial DNA, and what we aim is to prevent the transmission of one of them to the next generation. So we use these molecular scissors at the level of oocytes or embryo, and actually we saw that we were able to prevent the transmission to next generation, and not only to the first one, but to the generation, the third and fourth one.
So the little mice come out okay afterwards
Yes.
without this. Now, Evan, are there ethical concerns with the type of research going on here at Salk, messing with the DNA, the mitochondrial DNA in mice?
Well, I think the most pressing ethical concern, other than dealing with manipulation of the genome, is whether or not you are, A, going to introduce unintended changes, create other diseases, change traits that were unanticipated. That's one area. And then the second is, could you influence subsequent generations and create something that that you did not anticipate, but now gets carried in humankind, so to speak, if this were in humans.
So bringing it back to the whole human race. Now, I know in China, scientists tried something similar, not exactly with nuclear DNA in human embryos, but the embryos weren't viable. Unlike yours, these embryos couldn't reproduce and didn't go on to be viable. But that whole experiment in China caused quite a backlash and quite an ethical uproar. What is the issue a little bit more as far as when you're dealing with human embryos?
Well, first of all, in dealing with human embryos, one is dealing with the roots of human life. The experiment in China probably would never have been sanctioned in this country. And I don't think scientists here are endorsing the fact that that experiment was done. However, one always tries to find something instructive, even in an experiment like that. And the lesson we learned was that, in fact, our fears were confirmed. That, in fact, there were off-target effects. There were mutations that were unintended. And that had this been done, it would have created offspring and maybe even a lineage that would have been horrible and terrible. So we've learned that, in fact, we need more science before we could ever move on.
Sure, and the science is like what you're doing, Alex. So are there next steps for the mice embryo or other embryos how will you continue in this research?
Okay, so obviously the next step will be to move to humans. So we plan to use oocytes from mitochondrial disease carriers, or also discarded embryos from IVF treatments. The idea is mainly to prove safety, so we want to make sure that this technique is safe. So we will go ahead and do some research with human samples just to verify that the technique can be used in a safe way. And that, I guess, will open the door to the next step that will try to see if the technique can be applied in the clinic. So you have to demonstrate that the technique can be good use to eliminate the mutated DNA in the human embryo. So that will be, I guess, next step. But first we go with safety and make sure that the technique doesn't have off-target effects like in the Chinese.
So we have a few years off here before we see any results in the human population on this. All right, Alex Ocampo and Evan Snyder, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we get some personal views of the upcoming Supreme Court arguments over gay marriage. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
For hikers trying to scale the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada, April is the best time to start. It helps them avoid the scorching heat and snow in the mountains. KPBS reporter Claire Traeger went to a kickoff for hikers in eastern San Diego and brings us this report.
The Pacific Crest Trail runs 2,650 miles from Mexico to Canada, and this year thousands of hikers are hoping to make the journey.
Plans to go all the way to the border if I make it. I'm going to be out here till the trail kicks me off for one reason or the other.
Brett Halleck is an airplane mechanic from Colorado and says very little will stop his trek.
Injury, running out of money, getting eaten by a bear.
For the past 16 years, a mid-April kickoff for hikers has been held at Lake Morena County Park near Campo. Organizer Carl Seekert says they help people prepare.
Providing a lot of the information that improves their chances of success and survival, for that matter.
Shops are set up to sell gear, while veteran hikers go through novices' backpacks to weed out extra weight.
What's this?
Laundry liquid.
Laundry powder.
Laundry powder.
Are you going to wash your things on the trail?
Keeping clean on the trail is generally a lost cause anyway. I mean, you may or may not have heard that hikers smell. I'm here to tell you it's true.
It used to be that about 300 people would attempt the hike each year. Then
I wouldn't do a single thing differently. What if all those things I did were the things that got me here?
Cheryl Strade's book Wild, about hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, became a bestseller, then a movie starring Reese Witherspoon. Now the trail's popularity has exploded. This year, 3,500 people are planning to hike, 10 times more than before the book came out. But Seekert doesn't mind the trail getting extra attention.
It's great to have more people out there enjoying all that the trail has to offer.
And he doesn't think many unprepared hikers will try to follow in Witherspoon's footsteps.
It didn't glamorize it. It showed her losing toenails and bruises all over and being hungry and thirsty and lonely and you know, all that stuff happens.
Despite the challenges they know about and the ones they can't predict, hikers are launching themselves from Lake Morena and heading north. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
If you're thinking about doing some hiking, we are looking at warmer weather for the week. Expect 70s by the beaches over the next few days with a mix of sun and clouds, 80s in the inland valleys. Cooler for the mountains, though, into the 50s. Look at that by Thursday. Sunny and warm in the desert. We could actually see triple digits there. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.